welcome to Talking Scotch with me, Pierre Meintjes. Today we're going to be talking and tasting about one of my favourite single malts, the Bunnahabhain range. Now, anybody who knows anything about their malts will know that anything from the island of Islay normally is big, peaty, smoky, medicinal, TCP. All those words are used to describe those whiskies. In our case, Bunnahabhain is totally the opposite. And it's like that for two reasons. The first reason is Bunnahabhain actually means the mouth of a river. In this case, it's not actually a river, but it's a spring. It's the Margaret Spring. And in 1881, the distillery was built next to the spring, and the water's been pumped out of the spring in a pipe into holding tanks into the distillery to make sure the water doesn't come into contact with any other surface water or land. Secondly, when the barley is malted, these days you don't have to use a peat fire. In the olden days, all barley was malted by using a peat fire, which meant your whiskey was going to be peaty and smoky, big and rich and full. These days we can dry the barley by using what we call the indirect method. So the barley is put into a kiln and it's blow dried with something like a hairdryer. So hot air is blown over the barley, which then stops the germination process, which means no peat smoke is infused at all. Whereas all the other distilleries on Islay use barley that's totally peated, and their water source is either a loch or a river, which means their water is peated as well. So the first whiskey we're going to look at is the Bunnahabhain 12-year-old. Remember, when a whiskey's got an age statement on it, it says 12 years old, it means the youngest liquid has been in a barrel for a minimum of 12 years. As it turns out, for commercial purposes available in South Africa, they make an 18-year-old and a 25-year-old. So that tells me there are whiskies that are up to 17 years old in this 12-year-old whiskey. Like most distilleries in Scotland, they use both sherry casks and bourbon casks to mature their whiskey. But it's the combination of age and the combination of how those casks are put together that gives you this unique style of three very different whiskies from the same distillery. So the 12-year-old uses approximately, and when I say approximately, I mean approximately because barrels are living things, approximately 25% ex-sherry casks, now filled with whiskey obviously, and 75% ex-bourbon casks, now filled with whiskey. So I've pre-poured some of these whiskies. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a little swirl just to wake them up a little bit. This is the 12-year-old. As you can see, beautiful legs on the glass, taking a long time for that ring to develop, and the legs are sliding down very, very slowly. That is an indication of good age and good quality spirit. Now, what I like to do is I like to nose the whiskey before we even taste it. Remember, your senses are different. Your eyes, in fact, are your first sense, but they're actually your worst sense. If you look at something, particularly a spirit, and it's dark in color, your brain starts saying strong, old, etc., etc. If it was weak in light in color, your brain would be saying exactly the opposite. So whilst we look at the color, and we like to look at it, it's not the be-all and end-all. And remember, depending on the style of sherry cask, whether it's Oloroso or Finos, and something or in between, your whiskey is going to be lighter in color. On the nose, though, this should be light, fresh, slightly fruity. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some water, room temperature water, put a drop of water into it. Two things are going to happen now. The first thing is this whiskey's been opened up completely. It's what we call in Scotland releasing the serpent. Whiskey's been completely opened. I can smell a lot more depth, a lot more breadth. I get more citrus flavors coming through. But also, in a few moments' time, that whiskey will start going cloudy. That tells me this whiskey is unchill filtered, and that's a good thing. It means the whiskey is almost exactly as it came out of the barrel, exactly as the master blender and his team would have worked with those barrels, tasting them all the way through their lives, bringing them to bottling, and by just filtering to make sure there's no sticks and stones in the bottle, this whiskey is at 46%, it's unchill filtered. It means it's as good as if you were in the distillery itself. Now what we're going to do is take a sip. Now when you take a sip, take a nice big sip, keep it in your mouth, keep your mouth closed, swirl it around your mouth, coat your teeth, your tongue, your cheeks, your lips, get everything prepared, and when you're comfortable, swallow it. Absolutely delicious. By keeping it in your mouth like that, first of all, there's no nasty surprise. You won't be gasping for breath. Remember, this is whiskey at 46% alcohol by volume. But the most important thing on the mouth for me is this delicious sweetness, but it leaves you dry. Having said that, it's long and lingering. So I keep on this lovely, warm, long feeling that I'm getting from the 12-year-old. The next one we're going to look at is the 18-year-old. Now again, if you're interested in the color, you'll notice compared to the previous one, it's darker in color. Again, beautiful ring, beautiful legs, and it's darker for a couple of reasons. The first reason is the liquid in here has been in a barrel for a minimum of 6 years longer than this one, but there are whiskies that are up to 24 years old in that 18-year-old. But it's the combination here of the sherry and the bourbon cask that makes it so different. If you remember the previous one, about 25-75%. In this case, about 40% sherry, 60% bourbon. Now that you know that, and you knows it, oh yeah, there's no mistaking. That sherry just comes and hits you right in the face. Delicious, fruity, big, rich and sweet. All the flavors of a sherry. Again, a little drop of water in it, a little swirl. Now that the whiskey's been opened up, and I can actually smell the grapes and sultanas and raisins, everything that a sherry is all about. In fact, this one I call fruit cake, like Christmas cake, you know, with the cherries and the spices, the cloves, that are all in a fruit cake, a Christmas cake. Well, that's all in this whiskey. Now remember the previous one, what that was like on the palate. Take a sip, hold it, and see what this one's like. Immediately, I feel the difference. This is creamy and rich and full. It's all about the mouth. This is mouth watering. In fact, as I'm speaking right now, it's making saliva. I'm still swallowing. I'm doing this with my lips. On the other hand, it's not down here. It's not warm and lingering down here. It's all about the mouth. And the sherry influence has created that. Absolutely delicious. Now the last one we're going to look at is the Bunnahabhain 25-year-old. Now again, there are whiskies that are up to almost 30 years old in here. You'd be asking, why is it so light then? It is in fact slightly lighter than the previous one. And that's because the makeup of this one is only 10% sherry, 90% bourbon. And 25 years plus in a barrel has done the work for us. It's actually produced this wonderful, wonderful whiskey. So again, amazing legs. No doubt the age. Just spectacular long ring, long legs. It's not the be-all and end-all when it comes to whiskey, but it's certainly a very good sign. Knows this, completely different. 10% sherry, 90% bourbon has given this creamy, caramel, toffee type flavor. And when I put a drop of water in it, because it's unchill filtered as well, it'll also go cloudy. Oh yeah, but it's opened it up now. And this one I call creme brulee. You know what creme brulee tastes like? Creamy, rich, caramel, all those sort of flavors. On the palate, absolutely delicious. Rich, full, slightly leathery, old, no wood. It's just so delicious. So that's the Bunnahabhain range, available in South Africa at your major stores. We're not talking about cheap whiskies here. Having said that, they're worth every cent. Go out and try them. Remember, difficult to pronounce, very easy to drink. As we say in Scotland, Slangy Van.